The obsidian walls of the Supreme Concordance Chamber thrummed with a low, agonizing vibration, a physical manifestation of the collective dread that had taken root in the hearts of the Krill. In the center of the vast, cyclopean space, a holographic projection flickered, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the assembled council. Before them, the unadulterated horror of the Zidonian broadcast replayed, the fiery obliteration of the human world, Earth, a planet they had dismissed as insignificant, a primitive backwater. Now that insignificance had become a terrifying enigma, an unanswerable question that echoed in the echoing silence of the chamber. Grand Admiral Varkos, his carapace shimmering with a sheen of cold sweat, felt a tremor in his mandibles, a prelude to the anxiety that gnawed relentlessly at his composure. The broadcast, a victory celebration by the Zidonians, had morphed into a cataclysmic nightmare. It had shown the complete eradication of the human world. A planet they had considered no threat was now a cosmic vacuum. 20 million humans had perished in the Zidonians' initial strike. And now, nothing remained. The silence that followed the final burst of the Zidonians' triumphant, high-pitched screech was broken only by the crackle of the damaged transmission. He remembered the arrogant pronouncements of the Zidonian High Command, their boastful claims of effortless conquest, their disdainful assessment of the hairless apes of Earth. He had been among those who had initially agreed, who had seen the humans as a minor distraction, a species too primitive to pose any real danger. Now he wondered if his caution, his lingering reservations, had been right all along. The broadcast, meant as a show of strength, had instead become a morbid monument to the folly of underestimation. The holographic display cycled again, repeating the destruction, the raw, brutal violence unleashed by the Zidonian fleet. The Krill, a species renowned for their strategic acumen and cautious nature, were accustomed to carefully calculated campaigns, to the systematic dismantling of their enemies. The Zidonians, in their eagerness for dominance, had adopted a far more ruthless and direct approach. Now, the repercussions of that brutality had arrived with a devastating speed. Grand Admiral Varkos had never seen a fleet so utterly destroyed, not even in the most brutal of their own internal conflicts. Every ship, every vessel, every life just gone. The sudden, absolute annihilation of Earth was an unprecedented event. It defied all known principles of warfare, all established protocols of engagement. The Zidonians had expected a swift, decisive victory. Instead, they had stumbled into an existential abyss. The absence of the humans was not a victory for anyone. He felt it deep in his carapace, an almost physical sense of foreboding. He remembered a distant warning, a faint whisper from the elder seers, about a darkness that slept in the spaces between the stars. A darkness that might arise and consume all if provoked. The Zidonians, in their reckless ambition, might have awakened something far more terrifying than the humans could ever have been. "The silence is unsettling," Counselor Xylo rasped, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that reverberated through the chamber. Xylo was a veteran of countless galactic conflicts, a creature whose very presence exuded an aura of calculated ruthlessness, of cold, detached logic. But even he seemed shaken by the events. The holographic images flickered across his multifaceted eyes, each reflecting the horrifying spectacle of Earth's destruction. "Unsettling," echoed Counselor Zara, her voice a high-pitched, melodic whine that dripped with thinly veiled fear. "It is a void, a complete and utter absence where there should be." She paused, struggling to find the appropriate words. "Resistance, retaliation, anything. The Zidonians boasted of victory, but what do we see? Only the echoes of their arrogance." The silence returned, heavier now, laden with a palpable sense of unease. The Krill Council, the governing body of the Krill Empire, consisted of the most astute and influential minds in the galaxy. They had navigated treacherous political landscapes, outmaneuvered countless adversaries, and built an empire on the foundations of strategy and pragmatism. But the annihilation of Earth had thrown them into a state of unprecedented disorientation. They did not understand what had happened. They did not understand how it had happened. And most chillingly, they did not understand what it meant. What had this species, this hairless ape, this insignificant race done to achieve their final fate? Grand Admiral Varkos cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the vast chamber. The Zidonians' initial assessment of the humans was dismissive. They assumed a swift conquest. Their approach was predicated on a belief in their own superiority and the utter inferiority of their target. They underestimated the tenacity of the humans, and perhaps they underestimated something else. He allowed his words to hang in the air, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his fellow counselors. "What else, Admiral?" Counselor Zara demanded, her voice edged with impatience. The pressure of the moment was clearly taking its toll. We do not know, Varkos admitted. The data is incomplete, contradictory. The Zidonian reports are tainted, to say the least, but the evidence suggests something beyond simple destruction. The absence of debris, the lack of any discernible radiation signature, it defies all known laws of physics. It's as if the humans simply ceased to exist. He paused, his gaze fixed on the holographic display, the ghostly remnants of a world that had vanished in an instant. Annihilation, Counselor Xylo stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Complete and total annihilation. This is what we have witnessed. The Zidonians sought dominance and they have achieved a Pyrrhic victory. They have eradicated their target, but in doing so they have exposed a weakness, a vulnerability that may be far more devastating. He turned his multifaceted eyes towards Varkos, the unspoken question hanging in the air. What now? The question echoed in the minds of every Krill present. What now? The Krill Empire had always operated on the principle of survival, to avoid becoming extinct. But how does one survive when the very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling? The destruction of Earth was not merely a military event. It was a cosmic anomaly, a violation of the established order. It had revealed the terrifying possibility that the universe was far more chaotic, far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. We must investigate, Grand Admiral Varkos said, his voice firm despite the tremor of fear that still lingered within him. We must gather all available data, analyze every piece of information, and understand what occurred. We must understand how the humans were destroyed and whether or not they were responsible for their own demise. He paused, gathering his thoughts. We must also consider the possibility that the Zidonians were not the aggressors, that they were retaliated against. This could be a warning. Perhaps it is a message from some other power. We must approach this with caution, with utmost care. Counselor Zara scoffed, the sound sharp and grating. Care? Admiral, we are facing an unknown entity, an entity capable of wiping out a planet in the blink of an eye. We cannot afford to be cautious. We must act decisively. Decisiveness without understanding is recklessness, Varkos countered, his voice steady. We cannot afford to repeat the Zidonians' mistake. They acted with arrogance and ignorance, and they paid the ultimate price. A low murmur rippled through the chamber, a mixture of fear and disagreement. The Krill, for all their strategic prowess, were not immune to the pressures of panic. The unknown was always the most terrifying enemy, the one that could not be predicted, the one that could not be understood. I agree with the Admiral, Counselor Xylo said, his voice cutting through the rising tension. We must proceed with caution. We have no frame of reference for this event. We have no knowledge of the forces involved. A hasty response could be catastrophic. He looked at the other counselors, his multifaceted eyes assessing their reactions. We must send a probe, an unmanned vessel. We must gather whatever information we can, and we must be prepared for the worst. The decision was made. A small automated probe equipped with the most advanced sensors would be dispatched to the site of Earth's destruction. The probe was designed to gather data, to analyze the remnants of the planet, to uncover the secrets of what had transpired. It was a perilous mission, but a necessary one. The fate of the Krill Empire, perhaps the fate of the galaxy, might depend on the information it could obtain. The Krill fleet mobilized, a silent, disciplined choreography of vessels preparing to investigate the wreckage of a civilization they had once dismissed. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. The Krill watched the probe's progress with bated breath, their sensors constantly analyzing the incoming data. At first, the results were inconclusive. The probe transmitted streams of raw data, a chaotic jumble of readings that defied easy interpretation. The area that had once been Earth was utterly devoid of life, a cosmic graveyard. There was no trace of the humans, no wreckage, no debris, no radiation. It was as if the planet had never existed. The silence from the Earth was a symphony of chaos. Then slowly the patterns began to emerge. The Krill scientists worked around the clock, poring over the data, seeking to decipher its secrets. They detected faint energy fluctuations, a subtle distortion of the space-time fabric that hinted at something more than simple destruction. The data was analyzed, reanalyzed, cross-referenced with every known scientific principle, and finally a breakthrough. The Krill scientists discovered a faint but consistent pattern, a signal, not a signal of attack. But a signal. The signal was of complex structure. It was composed of intricate, interwoven patterns of data. The signal was not a weapon, nor was it some form of communication. It was a testament, a message. The signal came from Earth, emanating from the area where the planet had once existed. It was not a call for help. It was not a threat. It was something entirely different. It was an acknowledgement, an echo of the past. The discovery sent a jolt of shock through the Krill Council. They had anticipated some form of weapon, some form of threat. But a message, what could it mean? The implications were staggering. If the humans had created a message, what else were they capable of? What secrets had they kept hidden? The council reconvened in emergency session, their faces grim, their voices hushed. The revelation had changed everything. The destruction of Earth was no longer a simple act of aggression. It was a mystery, a puzzle with potentially galaxy-shattering consequences. The probe has recovered a signal, Grand Admiral Varkos announced, his voice solemn. A complex data stream emanating from the remains of Earth. It's not a weapon, but a message. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. It appears the humans were prepared. Counselor Zara gasped, her voice betraying a hint of awe. Prepared for what? For the Zidonians, Varkos replied, or perhaps for something far worse. He gestured to the holographic display where the probe's data was being replayed, the intricate patterns of the human message swirling and evolving. The signal is a recording, a chronicle, a farewell in a way. The Krill scientists, working around the clock, managed to decrypt the message, to translate it into a language the Krill could understand. The message revealed the history of humanity, their rise to prominence, their triumphs, and their failures. It spoke of their capacity for both great good and unspeakable evil. It spoke of their curiosity, their resilience, and their unwavering determination to survive. It spoke of the Zidonians, of their brutal attack, of the humans' response. The message went on. It spoke of the humans' understanding of the universe, of the mysteries of time and space, of the forces that shaped reality. It spoke of the fragility of existence. It held the truth about humanity, the truth about why nothing remained. They did not fight back, a scientist on the War Council said, her voice filled with a stunned disbelief. Not with weapons, not in the way we understand it, but they resisted. They erased themselves, all traces of them, and of the Zidonians. How? Counselor Xylo demanded. His eyes were wide with a new emotion. It wasn't just fear now, it was respect. We do not fully understand, the scientist replied. But the message suggests advanced technology far beyond what we imagined. They understood the nature of the attack. They knew the Zidonians' approach. They recognized the inevitable, and they took action to protect something that was more important than their survival. Silence filled the chamber. The implications were staggering. The humans had not been defeated. They had chosen oblivion. They had chosen to sacrifice themselves along with their attackers rather than succumb to conquest. It was a strategy of such audacious scale. It defied all expectations. The Krill had never encountered anything like it. Grand Admiral Varkos, staring at the holographic projection of the human message, felt a strange sensation wash over him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was respect. The humans, the species he had once dismissed as insignificant, had demonstrated a level of understanding, a level of intelligence that was beyond the Krill's comprehension. They had not only understood the threat, they had understood the nature of the universe. And they had used that understanding to achieve a victory of a kind that he could not understand. The message continues, another scientist interrupted, her voice trembling slightly. It speaks of a threat beyond the Zidonians, a danger they understood long before their contact with the galaxy. It speaks of a dark force, a cosmic imbalance, a threat that could consume all. The chamber was plunged into a state of stunned silence. The Krill, who had feared the humans, now found themselves confronted with an even greater threat. A threat the humans had known about, prepared for, and acted against. The humans had taken the final step, and the Zidonians and everyone else had become collateral damage. They anticipated a cataclysm, Counselor Xylo said, his voice low and thoughtful, and they prepared for it with astonishing foresight. But why? Counselor Zara asked, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and confusion. Why would they choose this path? Why did they sacrifice themselves? Because they knew, Grand Admiral Varkos replied, his voice filled with a newfound understanding. They knew that their survival in the face of this greater threat would require something more than simple self-preservation. It required sacrifice. They understood that the universe is governed by laws far more complex than we can comprehend, and they were willing to disappear to protect us all. The Krill Council, humbled and awestruck, continued to study the message from the humans, unraveling the secrets of their civilization, piecing together the events that had led to their ultimate fate. The more they learned, the more their perception of humanity shifted. They realized that they had underestimated them. They had misjudged them. They had failed to see the depth of their understanding, the breadth of their courage. They had dismissed them as primitives, as a species of limited potential. And they had been catastrophically wrong. The message concludes, the lead scientist announced, her voice now calm, filled with a sense of wonder. It speaks of hope, of the possibility of a new beginning. It says that the humans were not the first, nor would they be the last, and that the light will eventually rise to conquer the darkness. The Krill had never known such profound respect. In the face of utter extinction, the humans had chosen to sacrifice themselves in the hope of saving others. They had destroyed themselves and those who threatened them. And in doing so, they had sent a message of resilience, of sacrifice, and of hope to the rest of the galaxy. Suddenly, a new alert blared through the chamber. The sensors had picked up a faint energy signature emanating from the area where Earth had once existed. "What is it?" Grand Admiral Varkos demanded. "A second signal," the lead scientist replied, her voice trembling with excitement. "A new message, but this one is different." The signal resolved itself into a set of coordinates. A star system, a planet, and a message. The Krill scientists worked with renewed urgency, racing to decrypt the new signal. They were the key. The human signal offered instructions. It was a beacon. The message ended with one final transmission. "Find us." The Krill exchanged glances. A new mission, a new purpose. The humans, though gone, had left a legacy of hope, a challenge to face the unknown and a promise of a new dawn. It was a moment of decision, to venture forth into the unknown or to turn back, to face the darkness or to succumb to fear. The holographic display showed the planet in the coordinates, a new Earth, its atmosphere shimmering in the starlight. The Krill, for the first time in their history, saw something more than survival. They saw hope. "Prepare the fleet," Grand Admiral Varkos commanded, his voice resolute. "We go to find them. We will find humanity wherever they may be." The Krill fleet, which had been preparing to turn around, instead changed course, now traveling at faster-than-light speed towards the coordinates, the new Earth. The Council had a purpose now. The Krill were no longer alone. The humans had made sure of that. As the Krill fleet reached the coordinates, they prepared themselves to experience something new. The new Earth, a whole new world. They made their approach. When they reached the surface, what they saw was an open field with a single, perfectly sculpted statue. The statue was of a human, and in his outstretched hand was a simple object, a flower. "They are waiting," Grand Admiral Varkos said, filled with a sense of wonder. He stepped out of his ship. The other Krill followed. As they took the steps that would lead them to meet humanity, the planet exploded with a flash of light. The Krill stared in awe and fear. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't an attack. From the ashes, a new, massive structure emerged. It was shaped like the very symbol of unity between the Krill and the humans. It was a message of peace. It was a beginning, a new dawn. The Krill, and all who might follow, would never be alone again. The humans had returned. And now the real adventure would begin.